चंदन मित्रांनो, sorry, Vijaya Goyal, sorry.
I thought you were not listening.
No, Sri Vijaya Goyal.
उपसभापति जी, मैं आपका आभार व्यक्त करना चाहता हूं कि आप जनरल बजट पर मुझे बोलने का आपने मौका दिया है। मैं बजट के समर्थन पे खड़ा हुआ हूं।
विजय गोयल,
पहले बजट जब आता था तो लोग सोचते थे कि बजट के अंदर ही महंगाई बढ़ेगी या कुछ वस्तुएं सस्ती हो जाएंगी, किंतु अभी ऐसा लगता है कि बीच बीच के अंदर सारा साल कुछ ना कुछ बजट या कुछ ना कुछ महंगाई या दूसरे टैक्स वगैरह लगते रहते हैं। पहले लोग कल्पना करते थे कि हम टेलीविजन या कार पहले खरीद लें, कहीं बजट के अंदर बढ़ तो नहीं जाएगा ये। किंतु अभी मेरा ये कहना यह है कि कोशिश हमारी लोगों की ये होनी चाहिए कि कम से कम खाद्यान्न में, शिक्षा में, दवाई में, परिवहन में बीच बीच में ना बढ़े में, बल्कि एक साल के बाद ही बजट इस तरह से आए कि जिसके अंदर लोगों को लगे कि अब इसके बाद कोई महंगाई या कोई टैक्स बढ़ने वाला नहीं है। हमारे कांग्रेस के वरिष्ठ नेता आनंद शर्मा जी ने अपनी बहुत मजबूरियां गिनाई। उन्होंने कहा ग्लोबल फिनोमिना था, वर्ल्ड वाइड फिनोमिना था, ग्लोबल हेडविंड्स थी, जिसके कारण इस सरकार की मजबूरियां थी कि अर्थव्यवस्था ठीक से नहीं चल पाई है। मैं कहता हूं सरकार व्यापारी की तरह चलना चाहिए। एक व्यापारी जिस तरह से अच्छी प्लानिंग करता है, सर्दियां आती हैं तो हमको लगता है हमको कंबल चाहिए, हमको हीटर चाहिए, तो हमें मालूम है कि उसकी दुकान में वो जरूर मिलेगा। वो सब चीजों की प्री प्लान करता है। गर्मी आती है तो हमको लगता है कि कूलर मिलेगा, कोई और वस्तु चाहिए, हमको मिलती है। तो उसी तरह से सरकार को भी पहले से सारी कुछ प्लानिंग करके चलनी चाहिए। मुझे वाजपेयी जी की याद आती है, एनडीए की सरकार में जिसने सबसे ज्यादा संकट सहे थे। 1998 में परमाणु विस्फोट हुआ, सब तरह के सैंक्शंस लग गए, बड़े बड़े देशों ने हमारे पे सैंक्शंस लगाए, पर वाजपेयी जी देश की इकोनॉमी को निकाल कर ले गए। मैं उनकी इसके लिए तारीफ करना चाहता हूं। 1999 के अंदर कारगिल युद्ध आ गया, हमने कारगिल युद्ध भी जीता और अर्थव्यवस्था को भी कायम रखा। 2001 से 2003 तक सूखा पड़ गया पूरे देश के अंदर, पर उस सूखे पूरे देश के अंदर सूखे का हमने सामना किया और उस सामना करने के बाद भी हमारी इकोनॉमी ठीक चलती रही और हमने महंगाई बढ़ने नहीं दी। 2004 के अंदर बिहार और दूसरे प्रदेशों के अंदर बाढ़ आ गई, किंतु उस बाढ़ का भी हमने सामना किया और वाजपेयी जी की एनडीए की सरकार अर्थव्यवस्था को ठीक तरह से निकाल कर ले गई और हमने महंगाई बढ़ने नहीं दी। सभापति जी, आपको अगर ध्यान हो तो उनके राज के अंदर एनडीए की सरकार में जब कोई एक सिलेंडर लेने चाहता था तो उसको कहते थे आप 2 सिलेंडर ले लीजिए, किंतु अभी ऐसे नहीं है। अभी ये जो सरकार आई और उसके अंदर जो अर्थव्यवस्था हमको विरासत में जो बीमार अर्थव्यवस्था मिली, उसका सबसे बड़ा कारण जो गिनाते हैं लोग, वो गिनाते हैं उनके पास गठबंधन की मजबूरियां थी, गठबंधन के प्रेशर्स थे, इसलिए 2G जैसे स्कैम्स हो गए। उसके अंदर भ्रष्टाचार था, उसमें महंगाई थी, उसमें अर्थव्यवस्था चौपट थी और पॉलिसी पैरालिसिस था, क्योंकि कहते थे प्रधानमंत्री फैसले नहीं ले सकते हैं, पावर सेंटर एक नहीं है, फैसले कहीं और पर हो रहे हैं। इसीलिए आज मैं कहना चाहता हूं दोनों बजट्स में पहले की भी सरकारें अपना बजट अच्छी लाती होंगी, किंतु दोनों सरकारों में सबसे बड़ा अंतर यह है कि यह सरकार इस बजट को इंप्लीमेंट करके दिखाएगी। मैं वित्त मंत्री जी को बहुत पुराना जानता हूं। वित्त मंत्री जी के साथ श्रीराम कॉलेज ऑफ कॉमर्स में मैंने पढ़ाई की, उनके साथ लॉ किया और उन्हीं की जब यूनियन में वो प्रेसिडेंट थे उसमें मैं सेक्रेटरी था, इसलिए मैं जानता हूं वित्त मंत्री जिस काम को ठान लेते हैं उसको पूरा करके दिखाते हैं। जो उन्होंने विजन रखा है इस बजट के अंदर, मैं ये कहता हूं हमारी सरकार उसको पूरा करके दिखाएगी। फिर हमारी एनडीए की सरकार में और यूपीए की सरकार में फर्क इतना है, हमारे पास वो मजबूरियां नहीं है। हमारी सरकार अपने ओन के ऊपर है, हमारी सरकार गठबंधन की सरकार नहीं है, हमारे अलाइज हैं जो हमारे साथ हैं, किंतु हमको वो मजबूरियां नहीं है, इसलिए हम कड़े फैसले ले सकते हैं, हम संविधान में परिवर्तन करके नई नीतियां ला सकते हैं। हमारी सरकार बहुमत से जीत कर आई है। सभापति जी, हम में कठिन निर्णय लेने की क्षमता है इस सरकार के अंदर और इसीलिए हमारी सरकार के सामने 2G, कोयला जी, कॉमनवेल्थ गेम्स, इसमें लाखों करोड़ों रुपए का भ्रष्टाचार का सामना नहीं करना हमको। आई एम नॉट यील्डिंग। जब मैं कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन की बात करता हूं, जो भी संविधान में या जो भी संविधान के बाहर जिन नीतियों के अंदर भी हमको परिवर्तन करने की जरूरत होगी, इस सरकार में वो ताकत है कि वो उस परिवर्तन को लाकर कर सकती है जी। हमारी सरकार पॉलिसी पैरालिसिस में नहीं है, क्योंकि हमारा प्राइम मिनिस्टर एक है, पावरफुल है, और हम सबको साथ सबका विकास लेकर चलने की नीति के ऊपर चल रहे हैं। मनमोहन सिंह जी बैठे हुए हैं, पूर्व प्रधानमंत्री, बहुत अच्छे आदमी हैं, मैं तो इनसे रेगुलर मिलता था, ये सब सजेशंस लेते थे, पर कितना इंप्लीमेंट कर पाते थे वो मैं नहीं, संजय बारू जी की किताब में आपको पढ़ने को मिलेगा जी। कल आनंद शर्मा जी ने भाषण दिया, और भाषण देने में ऐसा लगता था जैसे वो सिर्फ रिचुअल कर रहे हैं, उनको भी लगता है कि सरकार का ये बजट बहुत अच्छा है जी। और मुझे एक बात नहीं और समझ आती, जिसके बारे में मैं कंफ्यूज हूं। आनंद शर्मा जी कहते हैं ये बजट इंस्पायरिंग है, नो बिग पिक्चर्स, नो विजन। मनमोहन सिंह जी कहते हैं इसमें लक्ष्य हासिल करने का रोड मैप नहीं है। शरद यादव जी कहते हैं ये शब्दों का गुलदस्ता है, बजट के साथ बुरे दिन की शुरुआत हुई है, शरद यादव जी कहते हैं। और भी अलग अलग लोगों ने अलग अलग बजट के बारे में बोला। मैं कहना चाहता हूं कि पहले यूपीए ये फैसला कर ले, क्योंकि बीच बीच में यह भी कहा जाता है कि यह सरकार हमारा बजट लेकर आ गई है, हमारी नीतियां लेकर आई हैं। तो पहला फैसला करिए कि यह बुरा बजट है या ये आपकी यूपीए की सरकार का बजट है, उसके बाद तय होगा इस बात का कि बजट कैसा है जी। कल नरेश अग्रवाल जी कह रहे थे कि एक टिटेरी चिड़िया है, टिटेरी चिड़िया है, वो दोनों पैर को ऊपर करती है तो उसको लगता है कि जैसे सारा आकाश उसने संभाल रखा है। आप टिटेरी चिड़िया की क्यों बात करते हो? आप कृष्ण की बात करो, जिसने गोवर्धन को संभाल रखा था और उसके नीचे सारी समस्याओं को हल करने के लिए जनता के लिए तैयार बैठे थे। आज वही प्रधानमंत्री नरेंद्र मोदी गोवर्धन को उठाएगा कृष्ण की तरह और इस देश की समस्याओं को हल करके दिखाएगा, यह मैं आपको कहना चाहता हूं। अध्यक्ष जी, कल उन्होंने, नरेश अग्रवाल जी ने एक शेर पढ़ दिया कि अब तो अच्छे दिनों से डर लगते हैं। मैं उनको कहना चाहता हूं, हमारे बारे में कोई राय कायम ना कर दोस्त, ये बदलेगा तो तेरी राय भी बदल जाएगी जी। और मेरे को मालूम है कि जिस समय सरकार को 1 साल होगा, आप ही लोग खड़े होकर इस बात को कहेंगे कि हां, एनडीए की सरकार ने जो कहा था उसको करके दिखाया है। क्योंकि मोदी जी ने एक सपना देखा है। प्रधानमंत्री कहते हैं कि इस देश के अंदर अगर कोई मोची है, कोई लोहार है, कोई सुनार है, कोई सरकारी कर्मचारी है, कोई बिजनेसमैन है, उस सबको यह लगना चाहिए कि अपना काम करते हुए मैं काम नहीं कर रहा, बल्कि मैं देश का काम कर रहा हूं, मैं देश का विकास कर रहा हूं। जब ये स्पिरिट हम लोगों के बीच में आएगी तो मैं ये समझता हूं कि पूरा देश जो सपने देखे हैं और जो बजट आया है उसको पूरा करने के अंदर लगेगा। हमने जो अर्थव्यवस्था सौंपी थी उसमें जीडीपी का विकास दर 8.4% से अधिक था, इन्फ्लेशन रेट 5% से कम था, फिजिकल डेफिसिट 6% से हम 4.3 तक तो ले ही आए थे, और करंट अकाउंट सरप्लस 7.3 अरब डॉलर का था, और औद्योगिक विकास दर 7.3% थी। पर हमको जो बीमार अर्थव्यवस्था मिली उसमें जीडीपी विकास दर 5% से नीचे था, महंगाई दर 9% से अधिक थी, फिजिकल डेफिसिट 4.5% और औद्योगिक विकास दर 1% से भी नीचे पहुंच गई थी। इसलिए हम ये कहना चाहते हैं, हमको तो 2 हफ्ते में कहने लग गए लोग कि आपने महंगाई इतनी बढ़ा दी है, आलू प्याज टमाटर के दाम बढ़ गए हैं। अरे आप हमें 2 हफ्ते नहीं, 2 महीने नहीं, कम से कम 10 महीने दो। आपको हमने 10 साल दिए थे, हम आपको दिखाएंगे करके कि इस महंगाई को भी नीचे लाएंगे। और आज प्याज के दाम बढ़ नहीं पाए हैं। बैठिए आप। राजीव जी, जो अर्थव्यवस्था हमको मिली है और जिसको ठीक करने के अंदर समय लगेगा उतना समय हमको लगेंगे। और टमाटर भी आपका हुआ है, समझिए, वो लाल भी आपके कारण हो रहा है, आपकी नीतियों के कारण हो रहा है। हमारी उपज तो भी आएगी। और किसी ने आपके बारे में कहा है, तुमने हालात इतने बिगाड़े हैं इस जमाने में, तुमने हालात इतने बिगाड़े हैं इस जमाने में, वक्त तो लगेगा ही उनको अपनी जगह आने के अंदर, वक्त तो लगेगा ही उनको अपनी जगह आने में। तो भाई थोड़ा वक्त तो आपको देना पड़ेगा। हम आपको तो पानी के लिए बोल सकता हूं।
तो शेर आप सुन लीजिए, शोहरत की बुलंदी भी एक पल का तमाशा है, जिस साख पे बैठे वो टूट भी सकती है।
और मेरा भी शेर सुन लीजिए, तू इधर उधर की बात ना कर, ये बता कारवां लूटा क्यों था? इतने सालों के अंदर जो अर्थव्यवस्था लूट गई, उसके बारे में क्या कहोगे राजीव शुक्ला जी? ये जो आपकी सरकार गई, ये अर्थव्यवस्था चौपट होने के कारण गई, ये जो सरकार गई ये महंगाई के कारण गई, और ये जो सरकार गई ये भ्रष्टाचार के कारण गई। मैं बताना चाहता हूं।
Sir Rajiv, please. Mr. Rajiv. Mr. Rajiv.
आप शहरों में मत जाना, मैं चांदनी चौक से हूं, गंगी जमनी तहजीब को जानता हूं, गंगा जमनी तहजीब को। इसलिए अभी आप सभापति जी,
kindly address the chair. You don't exchange yourself.
सभापति जी,
Anything you please address to me.
नहीं, मैं तो उनको बता रहा था। सिर्फ मैं इतना कहना चाहता हूं, सरकार में फर्क क्या है सर? पहले प्याज जब 100 रुपए किलो हो जाती थी तब सरकार जागती थी जाके जी। इस सरकार ने पहले दिन से कदम उठाने शुरू किए जी। चाहे वो निर्यात के मामले में था, $500 सीधा उसका रेट किया हमने, चाहे वो इसके मामले में था कि जमाखोरों के ऊपर छापे लगे, हमने तो इनके जमाने में कभी जमाखोरों के ऊपर छापे आज तक लगते नहीं देखे, और चाहे वो फूड सिक्योरिटीज की मीटिंग थी या खाद्य मंत्रियों की मीटिंग थी, हमने लगातार उसके ऊपर किया। पर इस सरकार को समय लगेगा, मैं यही नहीं कि दावा कर रहा हूं, और ना हमारे प्रधानमंत्री ये दावा कर रहे हैं, और उन्होंने मनमोहन सिंह जी की तरह कभी यह भी वायदा नहीं किया कि मैं 100 दिन के अंदर महंगाई कर दूंगा। उन्होंने कहा आप हमको 60 महीने के लिए चुन के लाए हो, इसलिए हमको थोड़ा समय दो चीजों को ठीक करने के लिए। और मेरा यह कहना है कि आपको दोनों सरकारों में फर्क सिर्फ इंप्लीमेंटेशन का मिलेगा। और मैं अध्यक्ष जी ये कहना चाहता हूं, ये जो बजट है ये विल पावर और विजन वाला बजट है जाके जी। मोदी जी सपने देखते हैं और उनको पूरा करते हैं, ये मोदीनोमिक्स है, ये भिन्न होगी सरकार। इसमें खुद कहा गया है कि आर्थिक सर्वेक्षण व बजट के अंदर तालमेल है। खुद आनंद शर्मा जी ने यह कहा था, खर्च और आमदनी के अंदर इसके अंदर तालमेल है, यह संतुलित बजट है, इसके अंदर पूरे देश का सोच किया गया है। मैं अगर लंबी लिस्ट पढ़ने लगूंगा तो बहुत समय लगेगा, किंतु जिस देश के अंदर 80% से ज्यादा लोग कृषि पर आधारित हैं, उसके लिए ग्रामीण सड़कों के ऊपर 14,000 करोड़ का बजट रखा है। मनरेगा जैसी स्कीम जो आधी से ज्यादा भ्रष्टाचार के अंदर चली गई, उस मनरेगा स्कीम को भ्रष्टाचार मुक्त करके ग्रामीण विकास के साथ जोड़ने का संकल्प इसी सरकार ने लिया है। राष्ट्रीय ग्रामीण आजीविका मिशन किया है। मैं सिर्फ आपको गांवों, ग्रामीण और गरीब के लिए जो प्रोजेक्ट बताए जा रहे हैं उसके बारे में बता रहा हूं। ग्रामीण आवास के लिए ऋण दिया गया है, 8 लाख करोड़ से ज्यादा कृषि के ऋण दिया गया है। किसान टीवी शुरू हो गया है, और यहां तक कि प्रधानमंत्री अब यह सपना देखते हैं कि भाई मिट्टी के अंदर कौन सा उर्वरक, कौन सा केमिकल और कौन सा फर्टिलाइजर डाला जाए, इसके बारे में भी सॉइल टेस्टिंग के सिस्टम बनाए जाने चाहिए। किसानों का टीवी शुरू करके उनको और ज्यादा एजुकेट करना चाहिए। और इस देश के अंदर जो सिंचाई की सबसे बड़ी प्रॉब्लम है, उसमें 1,000 करोड़ रुपया उन्होंने रखा है। सभी के लिए आवास, कौन सी ऐसी सरकार है जो कहती है दीनदयाल ग्राम ज्योति योजना के माध्यम से हम पूरे देश के अंदर बिजली देखने का सपना दे दें, हम एक साथ बिजली की कल्पना करेंगे पूरे देश में, किस तरह से पावर जनरेशन होगी जी। हमारी सरकार ने कहा है कि बेटी पढ़ाओ बेटी बचाओ का अभियान शुरू किया है। इसी सरकार में 100 स्मार्ट शहरों के ऊपर बहुत शोर हो रहा है। ये 100 स्मार्ट शहर कहे हैं हमने ये नहीं कहा कि पूरे के पूरे सब नए शहर खड़े होंगे, कुछ नए होंगे तो कुछ के अंदर और अत्याधुनिक सेवाएं और इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर उसके अंदर दिया जाएगा। इसके लिए लोगों को उसकी तारीफ करनी चाहिए। हमने एफडीआई के अंदर बीमा और डिफेंस के अंदर एफडीआई की बात की है, ताकि जितने भी रक्षा उत्पादक हैं वो हमारे देश में ही बन सकें। और अनुसूचित जाति योजना के लिए 50,000 करोड़, जनजाति के लिए 38,000 करोड़ का प्रोविजन किया है। चाहे वो वरिष्ठ नागरिक हो और चाहे वो अल्पसंख्यक समुदाय हो, उसके लिए मदरसों के आधुनिकीकरण की मुझे तो नहीं लगता पिछली सरकार ने किसी तरह से काम किया था। अध्यक्ष जी, मैं वित्त मंत्री जी को अपने कुछ सुझाव देना चाहता हूं, और चाहता हूं कि उनके ऊपर वे अमल करें। मेरा सबसे बड़ा जोर है टूरिज्म को बढ़ावा देना चाहिए। इस देश की इकोनॉमी टूरिज्म से चल सकती है। अभी जहां तक मेरी नॉलेज है तो 500 करोड़ का बजट रखा गया है, जो काफी नहीं है, क्योंकि मैं एक दिल्ली से आता हूं, चांदनी चौक से, जिसको वर्ल्ड हेरिटेज सिटी डिक्लेयर किया जाना चाहिए। इसके लिए हमको कोशिश करनी चाहिए। और हमारे देश के अंदर 5,000 से ज्यादा तो ASI के स्मारक हैं। इस देश में टूरिज्म का बहुत बड़ा पोटेंशियल है। और आज टूरिज्म एक जनरल टूरिज्म नहीं है, उसमें मेडिकल टूरिज्म है, उसके अंदर रिलीजन टूरिज्म है, उसके अंदर एजुकेशनल टूरिज्म है। और बहुत से दुनिया के देश ऐसे हैं जो टूरिज्म के ऊपर, टूरिज्म की इकोनॉमी के ऊपर चलते हैं। इसलिए मेरा सरकार से निवेदन है कि टूरिज्म को बहुत बढ़ावा देना चाहिए। दूसरा, मैं राजस्थान से अभी एमपी हूं, जोधपुर, जैसलमेर, जयपुर जो वीरों की धरती है, उसमें भी मैं समझता हूं कि बहुत बड़ा एक पोटेंशियल है। राजस्थान के रेगिस्तान में 2,47,000 किलोमीटर रेगिस्तान एरिया है, तो हम चाहते हैं उसका यूटिलाइजेशन SEZ लाकर होना चाहिए। राजस्थान को विशेष राज्य के दर्जे की भी मैं मांग करता हूं। वहां सूखे की और रेगिस्तान की एक बहुत बड़ी समस्या है, उसको देखकर सरकार को इस पे ध्यान होना चाहिए। मैं 2 मिनट लूंगा सर। मैं चाहता हूं सरकार वायदा बाजार पर भी अंकुश लगाए, चाहे उसको बैन करे और चाहे उसके लिए रूल्स रेगुलेशंस बनाए। मैं चाहता हूं, दिल्ली देश की राजधानी है, 15 साल के अंदर कांग्रेस की सरकार ने उसको स्लम बनाकर डाल दिया है। किसी दिन चलिए मेरे साथ दिल्ली देखने के लिए। 60 लाख लोग अनाधिकृत कॉलोनी में, 40 लाख लोग झुग्गी झोपड़ी के अंदर, 20 लाख लोग स्लम के अंदर। उसके लिए उसको ठीक करना पड़ेगा। मैं तो आपकी तरफ से सरकार से कह रहा हूं कि दिल्ली देश की राजधानी है, आप सब लोग यहां रहते हैं, आप सब लोग यहां रहते हैं। इसलिए दिल्ली को, आई एम नॉट यील्डिंग, इसलिए मैं चाहता हूं दिल्ली के लिए भी सरकार को एक बजट रखना चाहिए और उसके लिए NCR का विकास करना बहुत जरूरी है। जनसंख्या के नियंत्रण पर भी सरकार को और ज्यादा ध्यान देने की जरूरत है। मैं चाहता हूं सर, भारत की संस्कृति एवं प्रचार के लिए विशेष रूप से जाना चाहिए। इसलिए हम कहते हैं, हम सूरज होने का दावा नहीं करते और मिटाने का अंधकार पृथ्वी से, किंतु हम दिया जरूर हैं। तम से युद्ध करना एकमात्र हमारा लक्ष्य है। हवाएं दुखों की और अंदर तकलीफों की हमारी लौ को डिगा तो सकती हैं, लेकिन बुझा नहीं सकती। डिगा तो सकती हैं, बुझा नहीं सकती। जय हिंद, जय भारत सर।
Thank you, Mr. Goyal. Thank you very much. Now, Ms. Anuaga, this is your maiden speech. You can take 15 minutes. You can take 15 minutes.
I have been a member of the Rajya Sabha since May 2012, and I'm very happy to be able to make my maiden speech today. The budget has given me the opportunity. While all of us are proud of some of the achievements of our nation, we have our individual concerns. For me, the two most critical social issues facing India are first, malnourishment. Though malnourishment is critical, I would like to focus on the second issue of quality education, especially at the primary level. As mentioned in the budget, India has fallen from 134 to 138 out of 186 countries in the Human Development Index ranking for 2012 and 2013. I have seen with my own eyes what the power of education can do to transform the life of a human being. Let me give an example. Dr. Mashelkar, who was the head of our Council of Scientific and Industrial Research, came from an economically disadvantaged background. His father had died when he was 6, but fortunately for him, his almost illiterate mother pushed him to continue his studies. He went to a municipal school in Mumbai and eventually went on to finish his PhD. We know the rest of the story. The sad reality is that 65% of our children do not finish higher secondary school, and only about 12% go on to higher education, which means that 90% of our children are unable to realize their true potential. How many of these children could become the next Dr. Mashelkar or Dr. Ambedkar, the guiding spirit behind our Constitution and who rose to such eminence through the power of education? I have been involved with education for 18 years and am associated with two NGOs which are promoting education for the underprivileged children. As you know today, there is a great divide between municipal and the high and private schools, and the quality of education in most municipal schools is deteriorating. This in spite of the combined central and state spending on elementary education. It has increased by 138% from 2006-07 to 2011-12, and in the same period, government expenditure per child in public school has increased by 120%. And yet, I repeat, quality keeps going down, leading to growing number of households who choose to exit the public school system. Wealth and privilege often determine the choice of schools for our children. Thus, the social divide of our school system, private versus municipal, often reinforces social division. We know for sure that when we educate a child well, we improve her ability to make choices and lead a healthy and productive life. And so, in a myriad challenges that our nation faces, I believe that a strong focus on giving every child, and I repeat, every child, a good education will be the single most effective lever in bringing about a wide range of change towards an India that we wish to create, an India that lives up to our constitutional promise. Even if we discount the results of the controversial Program for International Student Assessment, PISA, we need to take heed of the 2012 Annual State of Education Report, ASAR, an Indian survey conducted by Pratham every year. It has brought out that quality of education in municipal schools is deteriorating, especially in languages, mathematics, and science. As parliamentarians, I'm sure we are alarmed and concerned about the results from the surveys and would want to do something about the quality of our school education. One important factor in a child's life is the teacher. By and large, the quality of teachers coming out of our current teacher training institute is substandard. Unless we radically improve the quality of our teacher training institutes, we will not be able to change the education landscape. I welcome the new initiative called Pandit Madan Mohan Malviya New Teacher Training Program to infuse new training tools and motivate teachers with an initial sum of 500 crores. This is much needed, but we also need to audit the capability of all our teacher training institutes. Unfortunately, being a teacher is not an aspirational profession in India. If a surgeon does not do his job well, the word will go around and patients will quickly stop coming. Same is for a lawyer or any other profession. But if a teacher spends his or her life without impacting the students, nobody stops them from being teachers. Where we need the highest quality and the greatest accountability, we are willing to live with mediocrity. It is time we imagine and create an India where teaching is aspirational, the profession attracts the best of talent, is respected, and our teachers meet the highest expectations. Right to Education Act has ensured that almost all children between the ages of 6 to 14 are enrolled in schools. However, it has not ensured retention because RTE focuses mainly on inputs and not on outcomes. For example, RTE demands that every teacher must have a B.Ed or a D.Ed qualification before entering the school system, but there is no mention of the quality of education these teachers impart. A degree in itself does not make a good teacher. Most of our teachers in our system lack the skill and enthusiasm. I have seen many non-B.Ed teachers do a better job, thanks to their passion and commitment than the ones with B.Ed. A recent teacher eligibility test, TET, taken by qualified teachers showed that less than 10% of the graduates were fit to teach, and these results were after special coaching to teachers. We therefore need to transform the teacher training institutes and introduce innovative teaching methods so that we consistently produce good teachers. We also need alternative routes to teacher certification to bring more competent people into education and keep the bar very high. Luckily, in our country, the thirst among parents to educate their children in a good school is tremendous. The result is that many affordable private schools have mushroomed. These schools certainly are not great, but many of them do better than the government schools. This is why so many economically poor parents spend their scarce resources educating their children in these schools rather than choose municipal schools where education is free. The well-to-do in India are for 100% privatization of education because the public system as it is today does not deliver. There is corruption, mismanagement, and complete disregard for human dignity. However, in the long run, unless we revamp the public system and offer quality education, it will lead to growing inequity. But till we bring quality education, we should not close down private affordable schools as stipulated in the RTE. Using the same yardstick, have we closed any municipal schools? Let me turn to my friends and ask how many of us send our children to a government school. My hunch is not a single one of us. If the rich are given the choice, why take it away from the poor? I would like to talk a little bit about secondary education. Time and again, surveys and media reports show that the poor are acutely aware of the need of their children to pursue secondary education. The reality is that as a nation, we have failed to create opportunities for poor children to study beyond the primary level. Let me illustrate this by giving an example from my own city of Pune. There are 307 primary municipal schools and only 23 secondary. The enrollment in the urban areas in secondary schools is low because parents are keen that their children learn in English medium schools. The second reason is that the standard of education is worse than in primary schools since the secondary schools lack subject-specific teachers. In rural areas, the problem is of access to secondary schools. Our nation does not have clearly articulated national standards of achievement for our children. Assessments aligned to these standards. Resources for our teachers and our students based on these standards. Developing these would allow every teacher to know the standards and learning outcomes for each grade and provide a roadmap for reaching them. Our society is still grappling with the question of how to truly promote inclusion and diversity. With an estimated 10% of our children with special needs, our schools must prioritize on supporting them. We must remember that when we make a classroom work for the most vulnerable child, we make it better for every child. Across the nation, there has been uproar from some of the private schools against the idea of having 25% kids from marginalized backgrounds as required by RTA. I understand the social and financial challenges, but I also know that it is our moral imperative to make this work, not just for the 25% children whom we bring in, but for the other 75% also. In our society, inclusion and diversity will be valued when our children grow up together, supporting each other, playing together, sharing the beauty of their diverse backgrounds. And what is inspiring is, it does work. In Kolkata, a visionary school principal, Sister Cyril, integrated 300 girls living on the streets into a high-income convent school. This was done way before RTE made it compulsory. When asked whether the parents objected, she said, of course they did. But she promptly responded, do I ask their permission to teach maths? Do I ask their permission to teach science? But you are asking me to seek the parents' permission to teach compassion? Let us look at the 25% clause as the greatest gift we can give our children, the gift of learning compassion. However, if the government is serious about inclusion, it must honor its responsibility to reimburse the expenses to the private schools on time. I truly believe education must focus not just on acquiring degrees, but being responsible citizens of the world. Our children need a schooling infused with stories of good. Hundreds of role models from Gandhiji to an unknown person doing act of good. Our children need to be valued not just by their test scores, but as Martin Luther King said, by the content of their character.
Please.
I am convinced this is where each of us can contribute. The nation looks at us parliamentarians and the way we conduct ourselves. Can we listen to each other even when we disagree? Can we have healthy debates instead of just making political statements or disrupting the proceedings? Since we are on the subject, let me also submit that I am disappointed that I had to wait for 2 years for my maiden speech. Frequent turmoils and adjournments did not give me a chance. 320 million children in this country deserve an excellent education. It is a daunting challenge. More than any other time in our society, we have the resources, ideas, and skills to solve a problem of this magnitude. The question is, do we have the will? Are we willing to join hands and work together, irrespective of our social backgrounds? More importantly, are we bold enough to dream beyond the realities of today? Are we bold enough to dream of the India we all wish to be? Let us prove that we are capable of such dreams and have the will and fortitude to realize them. I invite each of my friends here to make this dream a reality. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Sanu. Thank you very much. Thank you. Now, in the morning there was a demand from some sections of the House that the Honorable Railway Minister should make a statement on the accident occurred today. I hope you agree for that. Yes, Mr. Minister, please. Yes,
Deputy Chairman, sir, the members of this House shown their deep concern over the unfortunate incident occurred today at the unmanned level crossing in South Central Railway. With the permission of the Chair, I am making this statement before this House. Chairman, sir, I am paying to apprise the House regarding an unfortunate incident which has occurred today at an unmanned level crossings, wherein one school bus belonging to Kakatiya Techno School carrying children dashed against the train engine of train number 57564, Nanded Hyderabad passenger at about 9:50 hours on 24/7/2014 between Wadiram and Maisipet railway stations on Nizamuddin Sikandrabad section of Hyderabad division of South Central Railway. In this incident, 18 school children, including bus driver, lost their lives, whereas 18. No. Just now, Deputy Chairman, sir, sorry. No. It is not a type error. While coming to the House, I again got in touch with my officers there
this
in
is
this
latest.
spot. So
That is
it
what
will
you-
be
yes.
kindly rectified as 18 instead of.
What you say is the latest.
Yes. Yeah. 18 school children, including bus driver, lost their lives, whereas 18 children suffered injuries who have been shifted to nearby hospitals. The incident took place in Medak district of Telangana state at unmanned level crossing number 233C, which has a relatively low traffic density, that is 4,850 train vehicle unit as per the last census. Visibility at the unmanned level crossing was clear from all sides, and basic infrastructure such as road signs, speed breakers, whistle roads, leveled surface and proper approach roads are available. Medical relief was immediately arranged to the injured persons by rushing the accident relief medical train to site, and also about 10 road ambulances. The injured children have been shifted to nearby hospitals with the assistance of local public and civil authorities. Accident relief medical vans departed from Nizamabad and Secunderabad at 9:45 hours and 9:45 hours respectively, and reached the site at 11:15 hours. Immediately, General Managers, South Central Railway, along with the departmental heads and Divisional Railway Manager, Hyderabad, along with the divisional heads, rushed to the accident site and hospital. As per the preliminary information received, the incident occurred due to the negligent driving by the driver of the school bus. The driver did not stop the vehicle at the stop board short of level crossing to check for approaching trains as prescribed under Section 131 of Motor Vehicles Act 1988. On humanitarian grounds, an ex gratia amount of rupees 2 lakh each to the next kin of the deceased, rupees 1 lakh to the grievously injured, and rupees 20,000 to persons who sustained simple injury have been announced. On behalf of the railways and myself, I express deep condolences to the bereaved families and also express sincere sympathies to the injured. I trust this House will join me in extending heartfelt condolences to the bereaved families.
No clarification, but
When I got with me,
you can ask one question.
on my report here, it shows with 25 people. When I got with 25,
Deputy Chairman sir,
No, please.
Honorable Minister, statement is just covered. This is grave concern. 26 children at the moment, as per our information, have lost their lives. And his assessment through his official machinery may be looking right to him that the driver who also lost his life
Okay.
may be the reason for the
All right.
incident, but he should
not
have at
following
least
it.
shown a gesture of immediate manning of such. There are 640 unmanned
Yeah, yeah.
gates in South Central
That's
Railway
your
zone.
suggestion, that's your
But
suggestion.
at
We
least
can
at
note
this
on that.
decisive point,
Okay.
he should have shown a gesture, and their attitude towards
Okay.
the doling of ex gratia is
All right,
also
all right.
pathetic. Why can't it be 5 lakh rupees?
Okay, you
it
give
is
your
not the
suggestion.
measure. It is not the measure
Okay,
to
now
that.
continue with the discussion. That's your suggestion, noted. Your suggestion is noted. Okay. Minister has noted your suggestion, that's all, sit down. Minister has taken note of suggestion, yeah. Now I continue with the discussion. Now, Srimati, that I think, should we do now or we will do tomorrow? No, the chairman will, that is procedure, no, that is tomorrow morning. Tomorrow morning there is a procedure for that. That will be followed. Not tomorrow morning it will be. There is a procedure for that. We'll do it. That's yeah. That is it. Now, Srimati Kanimari.
Dravida Munnetra Kazhagam. I start by congratulating the Finance Minister for the first budget of the new government. The budget has come at a point when the country is going through a difficult macroeconomic situation and inflation is rampant. Many critics have said it is not a game-changer budget. Given the soaring price rise, the common man would have expected the tax exemption limit to have been higher than the announced 2.5 lakhs. But one cannot deny that fact that this budget holds promises, and it holds promises to many sectors and many sections. It talks about women's safety, improving sanitation, free drinking water to all. And I'm very glad to note the intention of the government to provide free drinking water, which is a basic duty of the government. And it's not treating drinking water as a corporate house. We have to understand that the success of this budget depends on the implementation. The minister has to make sure the distances are travelled and the promises are kept. On agriculture, we are with the government in their initiative to achieve 4% growth in the sector. But the government has to come up with a clear roadmap about how they are going to achieve this. The allocation of 5,000 crores to the Warehouse Infrastructure Fund is a welcome move. But a recent study by Emerson Climate Tech Group revealed that nearly 13,000 crores worth of fruits and vegetables are wasted every year due to lack of cold storage facilities and refrigerated transport. The same study indicated that 55,000 crores of investment is required in this area to ensure wastage is minimized. Here, I would like to request the minister also to consider developing cold storage and transportation facilities for the fisheries sector, as the fisheries sector comes under the agricultural ministry now. So a part of this allocation should be made for warehouse infrastructure and can be used for building storage units along the coastal areas for fish products. The previous NDA government had ensured that infrastructural projects were prioritized. We have similar expectations from this government also. We welcome the allocation of 11,600 crores allocated for the outer harbour projects in Tuticorin. The development of Tuticorin harbour is important to the maritime economy of South India. At this juncture, I would also like to urge the government to restart its efforts in the Sethu Samudram project, which was approved by the NDA government and was initiated by the UPA government, on which around 767 crores have already been spent. The DMK party has been supporting the construction of a second space launch site in Kulashekarapatnam in Tamil Nadu. Our leader Kalaignar Karunanidhi has written to the then Honorable Prime Minister in this regard on 19th August 2013. This issue was raised by me also in this house, and the then Minister of State said that an expert committee will study the feasibility of setting up the second launch site. We need to build a second launch site so that we do not entirely depend on Sriharikota for all our space missions. For instance, America has 6 different launching sites. China has 3. So given our ambitious targets about space mission, we should not put all our eggs in one basket. As recently as April 2014, a letter was written by the ISRO chairman Dr. K. Radhakrishnan to the then Minister of State in the UPA government, Mr. Dr. E.M. Sudarsana Nachiyappan, saying that studies are in progress to access the need for the new launch site. I would like to request the government to expedite the process and take necessary steps to consider the feasibility of setting up a second launch site in Kulashekarapatnam in Tamil Nadu, and allocations made for the study to include the budget, in the budget. Sir, the Madurai Chennai Port Elevated Expressway, a vital infrastructure road project, was launched in 2007 and construction work started in 2010. The project was scheduled to be completed in 2013. However, there has been unnecessary delays even after 800 crores have been spent on it. In February this year, the Madras High Court has ordered the restarting of the work on request of the National Highways Authority. The minister must consider allocating part of this road infrastructure funding towards the speedy completion of the project. Similarly, the Chennai Metro Rail has suffered from government apathy and is still in the final stages of the Phase 1 project. We had requested an extension of Phase 1 up to Vimco Nagar in Chennai in October 2010, and we are still waiting. We are also eagerly awaiting the implementation of Phase 2 and Phase 3 of Chennai Metro. I urge the minister to prioritize completion of such pending projects, and the budget has only allocated 74 crores for the metro project, which is absolutely insufficient, and we cannot complete it with that. In the budget speech, the finance minister has mentioned the need to develop 15,000 kilometers of gas pipelines. There are serious concerns about the environmental aspects of the coal bed methane projects in farmlands, and especially in areas like Tanjavur, which is the rice granary of the state. We cannot, just for development, we cannot forego agriculture. So a lot of caution has to be taken to protect agriculture and environment before any such project is launched. And in this budget, we see that there is a big push towards disinvestment by the government to the tune of nearly 60,000 crores. The need of the hour is to strengthen our economic fundamentals. There may be a short-term revenue gain by this move, but disinvestment of national assets is not going to help to make our nation more equal in the long run. I would like to ask the finance minister whether he has considered all other alternatives before taking the decision to disinvest. Has the finance minister considered bringing reform measures to improve the performance of our sick PSUs? Can these public enterprises be infused with professional practices and better accountability instead of selling them to private players? I would also like to ask whether the government intends to continue privatization of these state enterprises and it plans to withdraw slowly from state enterprises and states' involvement in manufacturing and industrial sectors. I'd like answer whether this is their policy and if this is going to be the future plan to disinvestment from state projects. A recent article in the New York Times says poor sanitation in India may afflict well-fed children with malnutrition, outlines the compounding problems in our country. According to the research cited in this article, a child raised in India is far more likely to be malnourished than one in Zimbabwe, Congo or Somalia. It shows that even after the passing of the historic right to food legislation, the health of our children is still dependent on hygiene and sanitization. The first NDA government had launched the Nirmal Bharat Abhiyan total sanitation campaign in 1999 with the goal of eradicating the practice of open defecation by 2017. The UPA government, which followed, showed keen interest to complete the project. In the budget speech, the finance minister has indicated that by 2019, every household will be covered in this project. But it is estimated that 130 million households lack toilets, and 72% of that 600 million rural people relieve themselves in the open space. So in order to achieve the goal, we have to build at least 130 million toilets in the next 5 years, which is 26 million toilets a year. The cost estimate of 26 million toilets is 40,000 crores. In this budget allocation, the finance minister has only allocated 15,000 crores for the entire Ministry of Drinking Water and Sanitation. This amount will not be adequate to build the necessary number of toilets. Just a couple of minutes more. The minister has announced, it's a very welcome measure, has announced about setting up of a textile park in many cities, and which includes Kanchipuram also. The textile park in Kanchipuram has to promote Kanchipuram silks and help create an international market for it. I like to remind the minister about the story of the Thai silk, which was actually revived and promoted by one single person called Jim Thompson, an American businessman who single-handedly saved the Thai silk industry. He took the traditional Thai silk and turned it according to the demands of the international markets. I think a project like this has to be done for all our silks and all our traditional products, that we should not lose the craftsmanship and the tradition of, but yet we have to modernize it and take it
now
to the international market.
Now please conclude.
And we should also include young designers and businessmen into this project.
Okay.
So the minister has announced 100 crores for interlinking of rivers, setting up of the Institute for Aging and solar power project in Tamil Nadu. We wholeheartedly welcome all these initiatives. With this, I commend the finance minister on his budget and insist that all the schemes be implemented at the earliest. So just one more minute, sir. I think even yesterday when there were discussions about the budget here, people are not very familiar with a small part of the history of Tamil Nadu, and it was misinterpreted here. When we're talking about the Kachativu, it was given away in 74. Our leader, Dr. Kalaignar Karunanidhi, he came once, he heard that the Kachativu has been, there's a plan to give it away. He came twice to Delhi to meet the then Prime Minister, Mrs. Indira Gandhi. He came twice and they had meetings, but of course the government did not agree. Then when he went, we had two MPs here, members of the parliament, Cherian and Marisamy, who spoke against it in the parliament, not to give away the Kachativu.
All right.
And when when our leader went back, there was an all-party meeting called for, and all the parties in Tamil Nadu took in that, and only one party.
Okay, now please. Don't bring in allegation. Why do you make your...
Sir, 1 minute.
Your good speech you are spoiling.
It has been misrepresented.
Your good speech you are spoiling.
Sir, this lie has been propagated time and over again in this house. I think once we have to clear it. That is all. So, sir, there was an all-party meeting, and one party walked out, represented by Mr. Aranganayagan, the ADMK. That's the only party did not.
But take it. Okay, that's okay. Okay, that's okay. Sri Jairam Ramesh.
Also a resolution in the assembly.
Now that's all. Now take your seat.
Against this, sir?
You will get a chance. Maitreen is speaking, he will reply.
Against this, and our leader spoke in 3 meetings against giving away of
You sit, now please. Now please.
Sir, this is
please.
and we were not silent spectators to anything.
No, okay. Mr. Maitreen, Mr. Maitreen, I am giving you a chance to speak. You sit down.
Thank you, sir.
Mr. Maitreen, I am giving you a chance to speak, then you can reply. Sit down.
Mr. Deputy Chairman, sir. Mr. Deputy Chairman, sir. I rise neither to criticize nor commend the budget, but to look at the budget based on the facts that are available to us both in the budget documents as well as in the economic survey. Sir, I am privileged that the former Prime Minister is present while I am speaking, because within 45 days of his taking over as Finance Minister in June of 1991, he had produced a transformative budget which changed the face of the Indian economy. I make this point because the Finance Minister has repeatedly said that what could he do within 45 days. The Finance Minister has also talked about the problems that he inherited, the issues of inheritance from the previous regime. So what is the inheritance of the current Finance Minister? He inherited an economy that averaged a 7.5% growth over a 10-year period. This is an unprecedented achievement in India's economic history and is the highest economic growth rate recorded by any democratic country in the world. It is true, sir, that the last 2 years have been years of slow growth. But day before yesterday, the Finance Minister, in answer to a question by my senior colleague, Shri Digvijay Singh Ji, presented data. And let us look at the 3 worst years of the NDA government. 2001, 2001, 4.1%. 2001, 2002, 5.4%. 2002, 2003, 3.9%. These are the 3 worst years of the NDA government. And what are the 3 worst years of the UPA government? 2013-14, 4.7%. 2012-13, 4.5%, and 2008-2009, 6.7%. So the problem is, I am not trying to score a partisan point here, but I do wish to underscore that when we talk of inheritance, it's not 1 year's inheritance that we should be worried about, or 2 years, but a medium-term inheritance that we get. And over a medium term, inheriting an economy growing at 7.5% per year, which means a doubling in less than 10 years' time, is an achievement that any finance minister should feel lucky to have inherited. Sir, apart from this inheritance point, and I raise this only because the finance minister repeatedly referred to the inheritance issue, I wish to raise 5 issues in relation to the budget from a professional point of view. The first relates to the Fiscal Responsibility and Management Act passed by Parliament in 2003. The second I would like to raise on GST. The third issue I'd like to talk about is the allocation for some of the key schemes. The fourth point I want to raise is on Aadhaar. And finally, I want to raise some issues on the question of sustainability of economic growth from an ecological point of view. So on the Fiscal Responsibility and Management Act of 2003, everybody is agreed that you cannot buy your way to prosperity. All of us agree that we cannot live beyond our means, that fiscal prudence must dictate economic policy. But I believe, sir, that after 11 years of experience with the Fiscal Responsibility and Budget Management Act of 2003, it's time for us to pause and ask some basic questions. Sir, isn't it better that India adopt the concept of primary deficit rather than the concept of fiscal deficit? Because with the primary deficit, what you have done is excluded interest payments which are not expenditures in the national accounting sense of the term. Should gross budget support to railways be included in calculations of fiscal deficit? Should the capitalization of banks, which the finance minister has talked about, be included in the definition of fiscal deficit? Does it make sense to continue with the concept of a revenue deficit, because there are many essential expenditures of the Government of India that fall under the rubric of revenue expenditure? 2 years ago, sir, we introduced a new concept called effective revenue deficit, which actually removes the grants for creation of capital assets to states from the revenue deficit calculations. But the problem of revenue deficit in our country is still problematic. And sir, isn't it time that we pay attention to the concept of a structurally adjusted deficit, which means that when GDP growth is low, revenue collections are low, you do not really manage the deficit by cutting expenditure. In fact, that is the time when government is called upon to increase public expenditure to stimulate the economy. So I think, sir, I would request the finance minister to have a relook at some of the basic fundamental guiding principles of the FRBM Act 2003. He has promised to set up an expenditure management commission. Perhaps that commission could be entrusted with the task of revisiting some of these issues of the FRBM without abdicating the overall goal of fiscal prudence, without abdicating the goal of living between our means, without abdicating the goal of borrowing only for essential investment which generates adequate returns to service that investment. But I think issues of primary deficit, issue of what should go into the calculation of the deficit itself. For example, sir, no other country in the world includes disinvestment revenue as revenue for purposes of calculation of the deficit, but we have adopted that procedure. The concept of a revenue deficit that I talked about, which is problematic in the Indian context, and this notion of a structurally adjusted deficit to make fiscal policy not counter-cyclical but actually pro-cyclical. So right now what is happening is that you continue with the fiscal policy irrespective of whether GDP growth rates are low or high. When GDP growth rates are low, you need an expansionary fiscal policy and you feel constrained by the FRBM Act of 2003. So my second point is on GST. We have had a long debate on the GST. We have introduced a constitutional amendment bill. It went to the standing committee. The Standing Committee on Finance Ministers of States has looked into it. They have made elaborate recommendations on how compensation should be paid to the states. And I feel, sir, irrespective of what has happened on the history, who opposed the GST in the past, I don't need to get into that history, but I do wish to state that this is a fiscal policy revolution that all of us are agreed will transform competitiveness of Indian industry, will make the ease of doing business in India a reality, and therefore I would request that clarity be brought on the roadmap of the GST in the next few months. A constitutional amendment is required. A bill has to be introduced. It will have to go back to the standing committee because the previous standing committee rejected the previous constitutional amendment bill. And sir, I do also want to make a point that in the desire, in the roadmap of introducing the GST, it should not be that we weaken the finances of the center to the extent. Cooperative federalism is all very well, sir, but cooperative federalism cannot be at the expense of the fiscal and financial health of the central government. If the union is weak, the states are going to be weak and the local bodies are going to be weak. So in our desire to introduce GST, which we all support, I think we should take adequate precautions to ensure that the union's finances are not adversely impacted. So my third issue is on allocations. There are a number of programs that have been introduced in this budget, giving the impression that nothing has happened in the past. I want to give a couple of examples. Mr. Vijay Goyal was very happy that 14,000 crores was allocated to the Pradhan Mantri Gram Sadak Yojana. So in 2012-2013, 24,000 crores was allocated to the Pradhan Mantri Gram Sadak Yojana. During 2000 to 2004, during the NDA government, the total allocation for PMGSY was 13,000 crores. In the last 5 years, the allocation for PMGSY has been 65,000 crores. So I am the first to acknowledge that the PMGSY was introduced when Mr. Atal Bihari Vajpayee was the Prime Minister. And our government continued with that policy because we believed that PMGSY was essential policy for building infrastructure. And not only that, we not only expanded PMGSY, we introduced a new PMGSY2 for upgradation, not for creating new roads, for upgradation of old rural roads, and states like Gujarat, Haryana, Maharashtra, Andhra Pradesh, Punjab and Haryana have benefited enormously from this program. So on the Namami Ganga program, it appears as if suddenly there is a discovery that the Ganga is dirty and the Namami Ganga program is going to be launched. So in the last 3 years, 6,500 crores worth of projects have been sanctioned by the National Ganga River Basin Authority, of which the Prime Minister is the chairman. 2,700 crores have been sanctioned for Uttar Pradesh, out of which 500 crores is for the city of Varanasi alone, which is represented by the Honorable Prime Minister. 1,700 crores has been sanctioned for Bihar. 1,400 crores has been sanctioned for West Bengal. 250 crores has been sanctioned for Uttarakhand, and 100 crores has been sanctioned for Jharkhand. So the point I wish to make is Namami Ganga, great, it's a step forward, but it should not be that, you know, we are accused of policy paralysis. You should not suffer from policy Alzheimer's, that you forget all the thing that has happened in the past and you start on a new clean slate thinking that you are the ones who have invented this program. So the Mission Clean Ganga was launched 4 years ago when Dr. Manmohan Singh was the Prime Minister with an objective of ensuring, but I am not yielding. I have acknowledged the role of Mr. Vajpayee in PMGSY. I have said Namami Ganga is a very important program which we support. My only request to you is, do not obliterate the achievements of the past. Consolidate, build, expand, modify what you have inherited. Because it is not as if you are starting on a completely new slate. Swachh Bharat Mission is nothing but Nirmal Bharat Abhiyan. We have launched the Nirmal Bharat Abhiyan, and that Nirmal Bharat Abhiyan has begun to show results in a number of states: Himachal Pradesh, Sikkim, Kerala, Maharashtra, Haryana. And it is good that Swachh Bharat Mission has been launched, but Swachh Bharat Mission has been launched on the edifice created by the Nirmal Bharat Abhiyan. So another example, Mahatma Gandhi Narega. Suddenly there is a discovery that Mahatma Gandhi Narega should create productive assets. So I would like to remind the Honorable Finance Minister that in 2013-2014, 28% of all works under Mahatma Gandhi Narega related to the building of toilets. 28% of all the works taken up under Mahatma Gandhi Narega related to toilets. About 40% of the works related to water conservation, and about 15% of the works relate to land and water in private farms, in private lands of scheduled castes, scheduled tribes and small and marginal farmers. So many of the statements that have been made in the budget on programs, the allocations that have been made, sir, I would request that while these are steps in the right direction, these are basically ongoing initiatives. Democracy is all about continuity, and I appreciate the fact that the finance minister has often said that he is continuing the programs of the past, expanding it, improving upon it, and I would urge him to not forget that these important priorities that he has enunciated, whether it is cleaning of the Ganga, whether it is rural roads, whether it is Mahatma Gandhi Narega, or whether it is the Swachh Bharat mission, basically build on ongoing programs that have been launched by UPA 2. So my fourth issue is on Aadhaar. Now there's a lot of confusion on whether Aadhaar will continue or Aadhaar will not continue. 60 crore Indians have got Aadhaar cards. Now sir, I think we need a clear statement. We need a clear and categorical statement from the finance minister. What is the future of the Aadhaar initiative? Sir, every year 3,50,000 crores of financial support goes to individual families, whether it is subsidies, whether it is maternity benefit, whether it is wages, whether it is pensions. Total expenditure that is going from the central exchequer and the state exchequer to individual families is 3,50,000 crores. And what the Aadhaar project does, what the Aadhaar initiative does, is eliminate fake, it eliminates duplicates, it eliminates possibilities of leakages in the transmission of these benefits from the exchequer to the individual families. This is not direct benefit transfer. I like to call it DTH. It is direct to home. It goes directly from the budget to the hands of the beneficiary through the BC network, the business correspondent network, which in many states take the form of women's self-help groups and so on. So I would like this confusion to end once and for all. Is the government committed? You may call it Aadhaar, you may call it some other name, but is the government committed to the use of the Aadhaar initiative for eliminating leakages in the delivery of financial benefits, which, as I said, sir, amounts to almost 3,50,000 crores every year, and pilot experiments show that at least 20 to 25% of this can be saved by large-scale use of Aadhaar. Finally, sir, my final point relates to sustainability. So why is sustainability important for India? My very senior colleague Dr. Karan Singh spoke about the population issue in India. So in the next 35 years, 400 million people are going to be added, whatever we do or we don't do. We are 1.24 billion people today. In the next 34 years, by 2050, we will be 1.6 billion. We are going to add 400 million people to India's population. Other countries don't have to worry about future generations. Other countries' populations are declining, but we are one of the few countries in the world which is going to have this phenomenal increase in population. Incidentally, even in China, in the next 30 years, the population is going to increase only by 25 million. So we have the problem of climate change, our dependence on the monsoon, our dependence on the Himalayan glaciers, the 300 million people who are living on our coastline, and our vulnerability, both current and future, to climate change. And sir, we should also not forget that the natural resources that we require for fueling our industrial and economic expansion, whether it is coal, whether it's uranium, whether it is bauxite, lies in our rich forest areas. And the more we extract, the faster we extract our natural resources, the more we are going to deforest, and the more we are going to contribute to the issue of global warming. So sustainability, ecological sustainability, is not a luxury for India. It is a necessity. And in our desire to give online clearances, in our desire to cut non-legislative taxes, all of which I am in sympathy with, I think we should not ignore the sustainability imperative, because this is something which is fundamental to our existence, which is fundamental to our future, and I think green growth is something in which India can show the way to the world. It is an area of strategic leadership. It is an area of technology interventions in which India can demonstrate whether it is renewable energy, whether it is green energy, in industry, in agriculture, in transport. And sir, I would only end by drawing your attention. The Planning Commission has been very much in the news, and the Planning Commission has yet to be constituted. But one of the last acts of the previous Planning Commission was to produce a report called Low Carbon Strategies for Inclusive Growth. So this is the value of having a planning commission. This is the only body in the government of India that can adopt a future perspective, that can adopt a cross-cultural perspective, that can bring multiple constituencies and multiple stakeholders. I would commend this report to the finance minister because this is a detailed blueprint and roadmap for low carbon growth over the next 20 to 25 years, which will ensure that we have rapid growth, we have inclusive growth, but we also have sustainable growth. Thank you, sir.